punishment. Most people go into arguments thinking it's about who's going to win, who's going to say the last word, who's going to come up with the smartest comeback, who's going to look stronger. But here's the truth: punishment. Arguments aren't won by volume, by cleverness, or by ego. They're won by control. The person who can stay calm, the person who can keep their emotions in check, that's the person who really wins. Because in the heat of a fight, punishment, when both sides are trying to talk louder than the other, nobody is really listening. You don't solve arguments by being the loudest voice in the room. You solve them by being the clearest mind in the room. And that's where the one sentence comes in. A sentence so simple but so powerful, it can instantly shift the energy of any argument. That sentence is, help me understand your perspective. Think about that for a second. Punishment. In an argument, people want one thing more than anything else: to be heard. They're not just throwing words at you, they're throwing feelings, frustrations, fears. And when you say punishment, help me understand your perspective, you take the fight out of it. You turn the moment from combat into conversation. You show them you're not here to attack, you're here to listen. And that small shift changes everything. Punishment. Why does the sentence work so well? Because it disarms. The other person is expecting you to push back, to defend, to hit them with your side of the story. But instead, you invite them to explain. You open the door for them to speak. Punishment. And in that moment, you've already taken control. Control doesn't look like shouting someone down. Control looks like keeping your composure when they've lost theirs. Control looks like staying grounded while they spiral. Punishment. That's real strength. Let me make this real for you. Imagine you're in an argument with a coworker. They're frustrated, voices are raised, and they're pressing hard to make their point. Most people would fire right back. Punishment. But if you say, help me understand your perspective, the energy shifts. Instead of throwing fire, you just poured water on it. Now they're explaining, not attacking. Now you're steering, not reacting. Punishment. This works in relationships too. In fact, it works even better there. When emotions are high, it's so easy to get defensive. You want to protect yourself, your pride, your side of the story. Punishment. But the fastest way to end a fight isn't to defend. It's to invite. That one sentence lowers walls and builds bridges. It tells the other person, I value what you have to say, even if I don't agree with it. And in relationships, that's everything. Because at the end of the day, the argument isn't really about the argument. It's about respect. You see, punishment, arguments aren't about winning or losing. They're about understanding. And the strongest communicators know that. They know that making someone feel heard doesn't mean you've surrendered. Punishment. It means you're smart enough to shift the battle from chaos to clarity. That's not weakness, that's strategy. So the next time you find yourself in the middle of an argument, don't reach for the sharpest comeback. Punishment, don't raise your voice to prove your point. Just say this one sentence, help me understand your perspective, and then be quiet long enough to actually listen. You'll be surprised how fast the fight loses its fire. Punishment, you'll be surprised how quickly walls come down. Because at the end of the day, the real win isn't proving you're right. The real win is walking away with your peace, your respect, and your dignity intact. Punishment. And that's what this one sentence gives you every single time. Arguments don't start out as wars. They start out as differences. A difference of opinion, a difference of perspective, or a difference of need. Punishment. But what turns that small difference into an explosion is the fact that both sides are fighting to be heard, not to be understood. And there's a big difference between the two. Being heard is about volume. Punishment. It's about getting your words out as fast and as forcefully as you can so the other person doesn't interrupt, so they don't twist your meaning, so they don't overlook your point. Being understood, though, that's deeper. That's about slowing down long enough to make sure the message that leaves your lips is the same one that lands in their mind. And in the heat of conflict, very few people are aiming for that. Think about the last argument you had. Chances are you weren't listening as much as you were waiting for your turn to talk. You weren't leaning in to catch the meaning behind the other person's words. You were loading your next comeback, rehearsing your defense, sharpening your counterpoint. That's what most of us do. We turn arguments into a competition where the goal isn't clarity, it's victory. And that's exactly why they escalate. Punishment. When two people are both pushing their voices louder and faster, neither one is stepping back to actually hear what's being said. It's like trying to tune a radio with two stations blasting at the same frequency. You don't get music, you get noise. When someone feels unheard, their natural instinct is to repeat themselves. usually with more energy and more emotion. They raise their voice, they change their tone, they use stronger words, punishment, because they think volume will equal validation. But it doesn't. Volume doesn't make you more convincing, it makes you more exhausting. And when both people adopt that same strategy, the argument turns into a shouting match where nobody wins. Instead of finding a solution, both sides walk away feeling misunderstood, resentful, and even more divided than before. Punishment. The irony is that most arguments aren't really about the topic at hand, they're about the underlying need to be acknowledged. A couple might fight over dirty dishes in the sink, but the deeper issue is one person feeling disrespected or unappreciated. Two coworkers might clash over the details of a project, but the real tension is about recognition or control. If either side felt genuinely understood, if they felt their feelings were acknowledged and their perspective mattered, the argument would lose its fuel. But because both are too busy trying to be heard, they miss the chance to address what's really going on underneath the surface. This is why the phrase, "help me understand your perspective," works so well in conflict. Punishment. It's an invitation to shift the focus from being heard to being understood. It says, I'm putting my ego aside for a moment. I'm not here to win against you. I'm here to see where you're coming from. And once you say that, punishment. Something powerful happens. The other person's defenses drop. They stop bracing for an attack because they realize you're not swinging. They start opening up, explaining instead of accusing, sharing instead of shouting. Punishment. You change the battlefield into a bridge. Understanding doesn't mean agreement. That's another mistake people make. They think if I listen to you, if I try to understand you, that must mean I'm agreeing with you. But that's not true. Understanding is simply about clarity. It's about saying, I may not agree with your point, but I value you enough to make sure I get it. And often that alone is enough to calm an argument. Punishment. Because once people feel understood, they don't need to scream to prove their existence anymore. They don't need to fight to prove their worth. So the next time you feel an argument heating up, ask yourself, am I trying to be heard? Or am I trying to be understood? If your only goal is to be heard, you'll talk louder, push harder, and escalate faster. But if your goal is to be understood, you'll listen longer, speak calmer, and resolve quicker. Punishment. And that shift doesn't just change the argument, it changes the relationship. Because relationships built on being heard are loud and fragile, but relationships built on being understood are quiet and strong. Punishment. Arguments don't destroy connection. A lack of understanding does. And the fastest way to stop an argument from spiraling out of control is to stop demanding the microphone and start offering your attention. Because in the end, punishment. People don't remember every word you said in the fight, but they will always remember how you made them feel. If you make them feel dismissed, the argument will live on. If you make them feel understood, punishment, the argument will die where it started. Most arguments spiral out of control not because of the topic itself, but because of the tension behind it. The frustration, the defensiveness, punishment, the need to be right, these are the forces that turn a small disagreement into a full-blown fight. And when emotions rise, logic takes a back seat. Both sides stop listening. Both sides stop caring about resolution. Punishment. It becomes about winning, not understanding. That's why tension is the real enemy in conflict. If you can disarm the tension, you can redirect the entire argument. And the one sentence that does that better than anything else is this, help me understand your perspective. And at first glance, it looks almost too simple. But the reason it works is because it speaks directly to the deepest human need in any conflict, the need to feel heard and respected. Punishment. Most people in an argument aren't fighting to destroy the other person, they're fighting to be acknowledged. They want to know their feelings matter, their viewpoint has weight, and their voice is valid. When you say punishment, help me understand your perspective, you hand them exactly what they're craving. You're not pushing back. You're not shutting them down. You're opening the door for them to explain. And that invitation softens them. Punishment. It pulls them out of attack mode and into conversation mode. Notice the word choice. Help me. Those two words are disarming all by themselves. You're not commanding, you're requesting. Punishment. You're signaling humility instead of hostility. And humility is contagious. When someone feels you're not attacking, their natural instinct is to stop defending so aggressively. They lower their guard. Punishment. They start to share instead of shout. And that's when you've regained control, not by overpowering them, but by guiding them. Then comes the next part, understand your perspective. You're not saying, Schmidt, convince me you're right. You're saying, show me how you see it. That's different. That's not a fight. It's an invitation to explain. You're not agreeing with them. Punishment. You're giving them room to lay out their thoughts. And in that space, the tone changes. What started as a battle of wills becomes a moment of clarity. Even if you don't agree, punishment, you've shifted the focus from clashing egos to shared understanding, and that's powerful. Imagine being in a heated argument with your partner. Voices are raised, accusations are flying, and the energy is heavy. Punishment, you could throw another sharp comeback into the fire, or you could pause and say, "Help me understand your perspective." In that moment, the walls start to crumble. The person who felt ignored suddenly feels invited. Punishment, the person who was ready to fight suddenly feels seen. And just like that, the tension drains out of the room. The problem hasn't disappeared, but now it's manageable because the storm has passed. Punishment. The beauty of this sentence is that it puts you back in control without aggression. Real strength in communication isn't about winning battles. It's about keeping peace while still protecting your boundaries. Punishment. Help me understand your perspective is how you do that. It shows maturity. It shows restraint. It shows that you value the relationship more than the need to be right. And that kind of control is far more powerful than shouting someone into silence. Does this mean the other person will always calm down instantly? No. But it will always shift the dynamic. Even if they stay upset, punishment, you've removed yourself from the chaos. You've positioned yourself as the calm center in the storm. And in any argument, the calmest person has the most control. So the next time you feel an argument escalating, punishment, resist the urge to fight louder. Don't throw fuel on the fire. Instead, disarm the tension with this one sentence. Help me understand your perspective. Say it slowly. Say it with genuine curiosity. And then listen. Punishment. Because sometimes the fastest way to end a fight isn't to prove your point. It's to give the other person a chance to finally feel heard. And when people feel heard, walls come down, respect rises, solutions appear. Punishment. That's the power of one simple sentence. Most people don't realize how fast an argument can change direction with just a shift in approach. Arguments almost always start in confrontation. Two people standing on opposite sides of the problem, both defending their ground, both trying to push their point across. That's confrontation. It's tense, it's defensive, and it's draining. Punishment. But there's a small pivot you can make, a single shift in tone and intention that takes that confrontation and turns it into curiosity. And when curiosity enters the room, tension leaves. Confrontation says, I'm here to fight you. Curiosity says, I'm here to learn from you. And that simple changes everything. Think about how differently you feel when someone confronts you versus when someone shows curiosity about you. When they confront you, your body tenses. You prepare your defense, you brace for attack, you look for weaknesses in their words. But when they show curiosity, your body relaxes. You feel seen, not challenged. You feel safe enough to explain instead of defend. That's the power of curiosity. It opens doors that confrontation only slams shut. Here's the secret: curiosity doesn't take away your strength, it multiplies it. Punishment. Most people think if they soften in an argument, they'll lose control. But the truth is, when you let curiosity replace confrontation, you gain more control than ever. Why? Because the loudest person in the room isn't the strongest, the calmest person is. Curiosity helps you stay calm. Instead of reacting with anger, you redirect with questions. Instead of snapping back, you lean in. Punishment. And the person across from you suddenly feels something they weren't expecting: respect. One of the best tools for this is the sentence, help me understand your perspective. That's curiosity in action. It signals that you're not here to bulldoze them. You're here to get clarity. And when you make that shift, you take the air out of the argument. It's hard for someone to keep swinging when you're not swinging back. Punishment. It's hard for them to shout when you're leaning in with interest. Curiosity lowers their guard, and suddenly you're not opponents, you're participants in a conversation. Think about a workplace disagreement. Punishment. A coworker is frustrated, raising their voice about how something went wrong. If you confront them, that's not true, or you don't know what you're talking about, you've just poured fuel on the fire. But if you ask, punishment, can you walk me through how you see it? Or help me understand why that feels so important to you? The tone shifts, they move from attacking to explaining. And once they're explaining, punishment, you're no longer in a fight, you're in a dialogue. That's a very different place to be. The same applies to relationships. Curiosity in a relationship is oxygen. When a partner feels attacked, they close off. Punishment. But when they feel like you're genuinely curious about their feelings, they open up. Saying, help me understand why this upset you, is not weakness, it's wisdom. It doesn't mean you're wrong. Punishment. It means you're invested in more than just being right. You're invested in connection, and connection will always outlast confrontation. Of course, curiosity takes discipline. It's easier to confront. It's easier to raise your voice and protect your pride. But confrontation only escalates while curiosity resolves. One creates distance, the other creates closeness. One breeds resentment, the other builds respect. punishment. That's why making this shift matters so much. So the next time you feel the temperature of an argument rising, pause. Ask yourself, am I coming at this with confrontation or with curiosity? If it's confrontation, the fight will grow. If it's curiosity, the fight will shrink, because curiosity invites honesty, clarity, and respect. It doesn't mean you'll always agree, but it does mean you'll walk away with understanding instead of regret. And here's the bottom line. Curiosity is not passive, it's powerful. It's the tool that takes tension out of the room and puts control back in your hands. Because when you shift from confrontation to curiosity, punishment, you don't just change the argument, you change the entire relationship. Control in an argument isn't about who's louder, quicker, or sharper with their words. That's the mistake most people make. They think dominance equals control, but real control, the kind that actually resolves conflict, comes from keeping your composure when everything around you is heated. Punishment. And the most effective way to do that is by lowering the other person's defenses. Because the truth is, you can't control another person's emotions, but you can influence how safe they feel in the conversation. Punishment. And when people feel safe, they stop fighting. That's where the sentence, "Help me understand your perspective," becomes so powerful. It gives control back to you while lowering the other person's defenses. Punishment. Arguments are fueled by defense. The second someone feels attacked, they protect themselves, sometimes with anger, sometimes with sarcasm, sometimes with silence. Their wall goes up, and once that wall is there, punishment. Nothing you say is really getting through. You can shout, you can reason, you can lecture, but all of it is bouncing off the wall they've built to protect themselves. That's why arguments so often go in circles. Punishment. Both sides are too busy defending to actually connect. But when you say, "Help me understand your perspective," you take a hammer to that wall. You're no longer coming at them as an opponent. Punishment. You're approaching them as a partner in the conversation. And suddenly, they don't feel the need to guard themselves so tightly. Their tone softens, their posture relaxes. They start explaining instead of attacking. Punishment. That's what it means to lower defenses. And here's where the control comes in. Once defenses are down, the conversation shifts onto your terms. You're no longer reacting to their anger. You're directing the flow of dialogue. Punishment. You're guiding them into clarity instead of chaos. It looks like you've given them the floor, but in reality, you've taken the wheel. Because control doesn't mean domination, it means direction. And the calmest person in the room always has the most direction. Imagine being in a workplace conflict. A coworker is upset, throwing blame, and trying to pin the problem on you. If you react defensively, the argument escalates into a back and forth battle. But if you respond with, "Help me understand how you see this," you change the energy instantly. You're not attacking and you're not running, you're steering. And in that moment, they're no longer dictating the fight, you are dictating the conversation. That's control. It works the same way in personal relationships. A partner might come at you frustrated or emotional, expecting you to push back. But when you lower your voice and say, "Help me understand why this matters so much to you," you take the fire out of their words. Instead of locking horns, you've lowered the tension. Punishment. They don't feel the need to defend as hard because you've shown you're not a threat, you're an ally. That lowers their wall, and at the same time, it puts you in the driver's seat. Some people confuse control with winning. Punishment. They think if I can overpower the other person, if I can corner them into silence, then I've won. But that's not control. That's temporary intimidation. Real control is when both people leave the conversation without bitterness, punishment, without resentment, and with more clarity than before. And the only way to get there is by lowering defenses. So the next time you're caught in an argument, don't reach for the sharpest comeback. Punishment. Don't fight harder just to feel like you're holding ground. Hold your ground by holding your calm. And use the one tool that flips the script. Help me understand your perspective. It looks like you're giving power away, punishment, but you're actually taking it back, because the second their defenses go down, you're the one directing where the conversation goes next. And that's the secret control without confrontation, strength without shouting, punishment, influence without intimidation. That's how you win, not the argument, but the respect, the clarity, and the peace that follow. When most people think about power and communication, they imagine strength as being quick-witted, punishment, sharp-tongued, or always having the last word. They think power is about outsmarting, out-talking, or out-shouting the other person. But that's not real power. Punishment. Real power in communication isn't in proving you're right, it's in creating space for respect. Because at the end of any conversation, people won't remember every word you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And if you leave them feeling disrespected, dismissed, or defeated, you didn't really win. You just created distance. Respect is the foundation of every meaningful relationship, whether it's personal, professional, or even casual. Without respect, communication becomes a battlefield. Every word is ammunition, every pause is a defense, every comeback is a counterattack. And in that kind of environment, nobody listens, nobody grows, and nobody leaves stronger. Punishment. But when you create space for respect, the dynamic shifts. You don't have to agree with everything, you don't have to surrender your point, but you choose to value the person enough to make sure they feel heard. That's strength. Punishment. That's influence. Respect doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean you can't challenge someone's opinion or express your own. It simply means you frame your words in a way that protects dignity. Instead of saying, Schmidt, you're wrong, you might say, I see it differently. Can I share my perspective? That's respect. It says, I honor you as a person, even if I don't honor your conclusion. And when you create that kind of space, Schmidt, people are far more likely to hear what you're saying because you've shown you're willing to hear them too. Think about arguments. Most escalate because both people are trying to be right. They throw facts, tone, punishment, and energy into proving their side. But the truth is, even if you prove yourself right, you can still lose. You can lose trust, you can lose peace, and sometimes you can even lose the relationship itself. Because nobody enjoys being bulldozed, even if the bulldozer is correct. Winning the point but losing the person is not real victory. Real victory is walking away with both the point and the person intact. Punishment. That's what happens when respect is prioritized over ego. This is why calm communicators often seem so powerful. It's not that they never disagree. It's that they know how to disagree without disrespect. They don't treat communication as combat. They treat it as connection. They don't raise their voices. They raise their curiosity. They don't corner people into silence. They invite people into dialogue. Punishment. That's why they walk away with influence instead of enemies. Respect also has another hidden power. It disarms. When someone expects you to fight and instead you offer them space, their walls lower. They lean in instead of pushing back. Punishment. They relax instead of defending. And that's when real conversations begin. By respecting them, you've created an environment safe enough for honesty. And in that environment, growth and resolution actually become possible. Punishment. So the next time you feel the urge to prove yourself right, pause. Ask yourself, what's more important here? Winning the point, punishment, or keeping the respect. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go of the need to dominate the moment and instead focus on dignifying the other person. You don't have to agree. You don't have to cave in. Punishment. You simply have to communicate in a way that leaves both of you standing taller when it's over. Because here's the truth, being right might give you satisfaction for a moment, but giving respect gives you influence for a lifetime. Punishment. And influence will always outlast ego. Real power doesn't come from winning arguments, it comes from building respect strong enough to outlive them.